Not too long ago, I made a video going over the timeline of live-action debuts for the Justice League, and in that video I mentioned that I will not be including Justice League members who are more prominently members of other teams like the Legion of Superheroes, the Justice Society of America, and what's important for this video is the second most popular team in the DC Universe, the Teen Titans. This video will include every member of the Teen Titans aside from those who are more prominent members of other teams, so very similar to the Justice League video, with characters like the Atom and Jesse Quick, for instance, being members of the Teen Titans, but much more prominent members of the Justice League or the JSA. I'll also be including all Teen Titans villains, as well as any supporting character for the Teen Titans, or supporting character for any character who is strictly a Teen Titans character, like Raven and Starfire, which is really a subgroup that doesn't exist for the Justice League. And finally, this video will also kind of double as a Doom Patrol video. I will not be including all of their villains, aside from the ones who are also Teen Titans villains, but considering the Doom Patrol are not big enough to get their own video in this series, and they have garnered a connection to the Teen Titans through Beast Boy and fighting the Brotherhood of Evil, that I decided to include the Doom Patrol in this video, at least their members that is, as again, I will not be including all of their villains. So with all of that out of the way, and without further ado, let's begin with the first Titan. Now, you might have noticed from the thumbnail that the timeline starts in the 1940s with Robin, but then there isn't another character until the 2000s, and yeah, that's basically how it goes down. The Teen Titans don't really exist in live action until the 21st century, aside from Robin, who is a step above the rest in terms of popularity and fame. For one, back in the 40s, none of the other Titans aside from Robin and Speedy existed, but also he's not just a Teen Titan, he's also one half of the dynamic duo, and as such popularized the concept of sidekicks, which is why the rest of the Teen Titans exist at all. So yeah, it makes sense that Dick Grayson would appear in live action for the first time before anybody else, but it is crazy how long all the rest took to debut, and some of them have never debuted, like the original Wally West. But anyway, Robin did not take very long to debut in live action, debuting in the Batman serial in 1943, just 3 years after his debut in the comics. If you're talking about Nightwing, however, there wouldn't be an actual Nightwing until Titan Season 2 in 2019, unless you count the one from Batman and Robin, because Robin in that movie does wear a Nightwing costume, but the movie is literally called Batman and Robin. He's not called Nightwing, he's called Robin, so it's not until Titans, played by Brenton Thwaites, that we would see Nightwing in live action. So actually, there's one other character from the 20th century to go over, as I'm skipping the Atom and Supergirl. Both of them have been prominent members of the Teen Titans in the past, but both of them were in the Justice League video, and the Atom is clearly much more so a Justice League member, and Supergirl has already been in 2 videos, the Justice League one and the Superman one, so I decided it isn't necessary to include them at all, leaving just one character left, that being Dr. Light, who I did not include in the Justice League video despite being a Justice League villain, cause he is more of a Teen Titans villain. So Dr. Light kind of appeared in Lois and Clark Season 2 Episode 12 in 1995. However, his name was changed from Arthur Light to Harold Light, Light spelled L-E-I-T. The name change is for unknown reasons, but honestly it's debatable whether or not he's actually considered an adaptation. An actual adaptation named Arthur Light would come in the year 2019 in Titan Season 2 Episode 9. If this adaptation in Lois and Clark doesn't count, then Dr. Light would actually have a gap of 57 years, which is significant for this video and the top 5 list at the end, but if it does count, then that's a 33-year gap. And that brings us to the 2000s, which basically starts the same way in every single video. There's only one exception, that being the Batman video, but all of the rest basically start with nothing but Smallville, until Smallville ends in 2011. This is no exception. We start off with Bart Allen, aka Impulse, or Kid Flash as he's better known on the Teen Titans, who debuted in Smallville Season 4, Episode 7 in 2004 with a 10-year gap. We already saw Bart Allen in the Flash video, and Cyborg we already saw in the Justice League video, since he's definitely very prominent members of both teams. Cyborg debuted in Smallville Season 5, Episode 15 in the year 2006 with a 26-year gap. So remember I mentioned earlier that Speedy existed since the 1940s? Well, the next Speedy, who only existed since the year 2001, debuted in live action before Roy Harper, that being Mia Dearden aka Speedy, debuting in Smallville Season 9 Episode 6 in the year 2009 with an 8-year gap. Then in 2010, the Connor Kent version of Superboy made his debut in Smallville Season 10 Episode 1 with a 17-year gap. So just a couple episodes later, in Smallville Season 10, Episode 7, a character named Emil LaSalle, aka Warp, who's a Teen Titans villain, appeared for the first time with a 29-year gap. Warp is not a very prominent Teen Titans villain, but just 2 episodes later, the most prominent Teen Titans villain made his live-action debut, that being Slade Wilson, aka Deathstroke, with a 30-year gap. He's never actually called Deathstroke, though. He's only ever called Slade Wilson or General Wilson. An actual character named Slade Wilson, aka Deathstroke, who also dresses like Deathstroke, wouldn't appear for the first time in live action until Arrow in 2013. And finally for Smallville is another character we've already mentioned before in a previous video, that being Jaime Reyes, aka Blue Beetle, who was in the Justice League video since he's been both a member of the Justice League and the Teen Titans in both the comics and animated adaptations. Jaime Reyes made his debut now in the year 2011 in Smallville Season 10, Episode 18, just 5 years after his first appearance in the comics. So now that we're in the 2010s, and more specifically from the year 2012, the Arrowverse has begun, and despite the Teen Titans never appearing in the Arrowverse, they did use a lot of Teen Titans characters before the non-Arrowverse show Titans began in 2018. The first of these characters is Slade Wilson's right-hand man, Billy Wintergreen, debuting in Arrow Season 1, Episode 5 with a 32-year gap. Then, finally, now in the year 2013, Roy Harper, aka Speedy, also known as Arsenal. He also goes by Red Arrow at times, but he was Red Arrow when he was a member of the Justice League. As a member of the Teen Titans, he was Speedy, and then as a member of the Titans, he's Arsenal. Now, if you remember, I did say that Speedy's been around since the 1940s, and actually, he's only been around for 1 less year than Robin. But while Robin took just 3 years to debut in live action, Speedy took an extra 70 years, as it took him 72 years to debut in live action from his comic debut. If you look at just the villains of Arrow Season 2, it'd be easy to mistake it as a season of a Teen Titans TV show, since the main villain is Deathstroke, and the secondary main villain is Sebastian Blood, aka Brother Blood, one of the most prominent Teen Titans villains. He debuted for the first time in Arrow Season 2, Episode 2 with a 31-year gap, and then in 2014, in Arrow Season 2, Episode 10, his mother made her live-action debut. In the comics, his mother is May Bennett, aka Mother Mayhem, who's a villain in her own right, and a live-action version of that character would appear 8 years later on Titans. But while this original live-action adaptation is less comic accurate, her name is Maya Risick instead of May Bennett, and she's not a villain in her own right, it is still an adaptation, as she still is Brother Blood's mother, and the name change specifically from May to Maya, just adding the letter A, is not all that drastic, at least not enough for me to not include it as an adaptation. Arrow took a 1-season break from using a Teen Titans villain as its main villain, although that villain was also not a Green Arrow villain, it was a Batman villain, but then in Season 4, Damien Darhk, who was a very minor Teen Titans villain, was the main villain of Arrow Season 4, debuting in Arrow Season 4, Episode 1 in 2015, 16 years after his debut in the comics. The next character is Wally West, aka Kid Flash, debuting for the first time in The Flash Season 2, Episode 9, and I've been over this so many times, but he's kind of an adaptation of both Wally and Wallace. Look-wise, is much more so Wallace West, and with that, he would only have a 1-year gap. But he's also the only ever adaptation of Wally West, and considering when he made his live-action debut they were the same character, he can be considered an adaptation of the original Wally. Once an actual adaptation of the original Wally makes his live-action debut, I think that we could separate the two, but for now, he's kind of an adaptation of 2 different characters, and as such will actually make it into both lists at the end. He has just a 1-year gap with Wallace, but a 55-year gap with Wally. The first member of the Doom Patrol to make their live-action debut is not one of the main members, it's Valentina Vostok, debuting in Legends of Tomorrow Season 1, Episode 4, now in the year 2016. In the comics, she is the Negative Woman, while here she becomes a Soviet Firestorm. Regardless, she is kind of the first ever Doom Patrol member to make a live-action debut, and she has a 39-year gap. Then, just 2 episodes later, in Legends of Tomorrow Season 1, Episode 6, Grant Wilson, aka Ravager, made his live-action debut, with a 36-year gap. He's never actually called Ravager, instead he's the future Deathstroke, succeeding his father. Cutting in the middle of all these TV shows here is a movie, that being Batman vs Superman Dawn of Justice, with Silas Stone, Cyborg's father, having his live-action debut. I did not include him in the Justice League video, so I thought what the hell, I'd include him here, and he debuted in the comics 36 years prior. In Supergirl Season 1, Episode 15, Indigo, or Brainiac 8, made her live-action debut with a 12-year gap. She is a Teen Titans villain in the comics, much like Magenta, who's been both a member and an enemy of the Teen Titans, debuting in The Flash Season 3, Episode 3 with a 34-year gap. Then in Season 5, Arrow used yet another Teen Titans character as one of its main villains, this time the main flashback villain of Season 5, Konstantin Kovar, who is a very minor Teen Titans villain, debuting for the first time all the way back in 1968, so he was an enemy of the original Teen Titans, but in live action, Arrow Season 5, Episode 6 with a 48-year gap. Moving on to 2017, Supergirl Season 3 Episode 3 saw the debut of M'gann Moores, aka Miss Martian, who debuted in the comics just 11 years prior. In Arrow Season 6, Episode 5, Joe Wilson, aka Jericho, Slade's other son, made his live-action debut with a 33-year gap. Although he's a complete bastardization of the character, he's not mute, he doesn't have his powers, he's a villain, and then later he becomes Deathstroke. A terrible adaptation, but an adaptation nonetheless. A bit of a weird situation happens with Amon Thomas, aka Osiris, who I'm including because he has been a member of the Teen Titans in the past and would never appear in any other video, but it's weird because he kind of makes his debut in Legends of Tomorrow Season 3 Episode 15. However, his name is not Amon Thomas, it's Behrad Thomas, and then later, because of some reality-changing events, it's changed to Behrad Tarazi, so in the end he has a completely different name and almost nothing in common, although technically, initially he is the same character, and as a fun fact, the actor who played the young version of this character, who was in that debut episode, would go on to play the same character but in a different universe in Black Adam, which is a fun fact that I came across while researching for this video. Then in 2018, a character named Tanya Spears, who becomes a version of Power Girl in the comics, debuted in Supergirl Season 3 Episode 18 with just a 4-year gap. This is a bit of a technicality since she's never actually called anything but Tanya on screen, and she definitely never becomes Power Girl. However, behind the scenes, interviews have confirmed that this is Tanya Spears, so it is definitely considered an adaptation. But that is actually the final character to go over before Titans begins, which is definitely the show that will give us the most live-action debuts. The first episode of Titans alone is the biggest single episode of Teen Titans character debuts, as Beast Boy with a 53-year gap, Raven with a 38-year gap, as well as Starfire also with a 38-year gap, all made their live action debut in this episode. So this will basically just be Titan Season 1 all in a row here, except for this one snag here, as Arrow Season 7 debuted around the same time, and brought in yet another Teen Titans character. However, it's more of a Green Arrow character anyway, that being Emiko Queen, aka the Red Arrow, who only has a 5-year gap. She is never called Red Arrow, and her mother is changed from Shadow to a new character named Kazumi Adachi, and because of this, and because she initially is a villain who hates the Queens, her name is not actually Emiko Queen, it's more so Emiko Adachi, but again, it is very clearly the same character. So back to Titans, Season 1 Episode 2 saw the debut of Hank Hall, aka Hawk, with a 50-year gap, as well as Dawn Granger, aka Dove, who's the second Dove, so she has a much shorter gap at just 30 years. Then Episode 4, which is titled Doom Patrol, saw the live-action debut of, you guessed it, the Doom Patrol, with Robot Man, Elastigirl, Negative Man, and the Chief, all of whom have a 55-year gap. Plus this dead body of a girl that appeared in this episode, who's Shailene Lau, who was a member of the Doom Patrol in the comics, and she has a 17-year gap, although for now, her only ever live-action appearance was as a dead body. Unlike Dick Grayson, Tim Drake, and Damian Wayne, Jason Todd was never really a prominent member of the Teen Titans, and as Red Hood, aside from on Titans, he was never an enemy or member of the Teen Titans either. However, he was, at least at one point, a member of the Teen Titans, and I wanted to include all the Robins that I can, because Damian Wayne has yet to appear in live action, but Jason Todd made his live action debut in Titan Season 1, Episode 5 with a 35-year gap. Raven's mother, Angela Roth, made her live-action debut in Titan Season 1, Episode 7, although on Titans, her name is not Angela Roth, it's Angela Azarath, and she has a 37-year gap. Then in Episode 8 of Season 1, Donna Troy, aka Wonder Girl, made her live-action debut 53 years after her debut in the comics, and yet still at that point, only 3/5 of the original Teen Titans, also known as the Fab Five, had appeared in live action. Episode 9 saw the live-action debut of Don Hall, aka Dove, and despite it being 7 episodes later, it's still 2018. Don Hall and Hank Hall debuted in the same issue and definitely the same year back when they did, and considering it's still 2018, he has the same gap as his brother at 50 years. Finally, for Season 1 is the main villain of the season, and one of the main Teen Titans villains, Trigon, who debuted in Season 1, Episode 10 with a gap of 38 years. In between Titans Season 1 and 2, Doom Patrol Season 1 came out, and considering this video includes all of the main Doom Patrol members, they will have a lot of live-action debuts, even though all of the actual main members already appeared for the first time on Titans. This begins with Doom Patrol Season 1 Episode 1, which saw the live-action debut of Crazy Jane, now in the year 2019, who has a gap of 30 years. Appearing in Doom Patrol Season 1 Episode 2, Cyborg's mother, Eleanor Stone, appeared for the first time 39 years after her debut in the comics. Doom Patrol Season 1 Episode 6, titled Doom Patrol Patrol, saw the introduction of that universe's original Doom Patrol, which consisted of Mento, who has a 55-year gap, Celsius with a 42-year gap, and Lodestone with a 32-year gap, plus another member of the Doom Patrol appeared in that episode, that being Joshua Clay, aka Tempest, who has a 42-year gap. Danny the Street debuted in Episode 8 with a 29-year gap, Flex Mentallo debuted in Episode 12, also with a 29-year gap, and then in Episode 15, Dorothy Spinner made her live-action debut with a 31-year gap, which brings us to Titans Season 2. Titans Season 2 Episode 2 saw the live-action debut of Rose Wilson, aka Ravager, the third and final child of Deathstroke, who has a gap of 26 years, as well as Shimmer, who is a Teen Titans villain and the sister of another Teen Titans villain named Mammoth, who has yet to appear in live-action himself, with a 38-year gap. In Titans Season 2 Episode 3, the original Aqualad, also known as Tempest, made his live-action debut with a 59-year gap, which can technically be considered the final member of the original Teen Titans to make his live-action debut, but that's only if you consider the CW Wally West to be the original Wally West. If you don't, then still, not all of them have appeared in live-action. Also, this version of Garth literally only ever appeared in this episode, and that's it. Cutting in the middle of Titan Season 2 is a character named Betty Kane, who's been Batgirl, Flamebird, and Hawkfire, who hasn't really been a member of the Teen Titans or Titans, but more specifically Titans East. And this live-action adaptation is barely an adaptation. Her name is changed to Mary Hamilton and is now Kate Kane's stepsister instead of her cousin. She has yet to appear as Flamebird, Hawkfire, or even Batgirl. Instead, she was Poison Ivy for a bit. So it's not really much of an adaptation, but there isn't really any other version of this character in live action, at least yet, and until then, this is the only adaptation of the character, and she actually has a pretty large gap of 58 years. Titans Season 2 Episode 9 actually saw the live-action debut of two different Teen Titans characters. There's one of their most prominent villains, Blackfire, who has a 37-year gap, as well as Adeline Kane, Deathstroke's wife, or rather ex-wife, who has a 36-year gap. So that brings us to 2020, which usually doesn't give us very many live-action debuts, since aside from the first couple of months, nothing really came out that year. However, they did manage to give us two Teen Titans character debuts in these first couple of months. First is from Birds of Prey with Cassandra Cain. It is a terrible adaptation, but an adaptation nonetheless, and she has been a member of the Teen Titans in the past. She has a 21-year gap. Then, in Batwoman Season 1 Episode 14, Duella Dent, aka Joker's daughter, made her live-action debut, which is actually a mistake I made in my Batman video where I said that she's going to make her live-action debut in Gotham Knights this year. Instead, I actually didn't realize she already appeared on Batwoman in this episode, although she isn't really Joker's daughter. I'm pretty sure her name is just Duella Dent, and that's the extent of it. Anyway, she has a 44-year gap. If you're wondering, Joker's daughter, despite sounding like a villainous name, has been, and for the most part is, a hero, and has been a member of the Teen Titans. To make up for the lack of introductions in 2020, 2021 actually gave us quite a few. In Doom Patrol Season 3 Episode 2, The Brain and Mansoor Mallah both made their live-action debuts with a 57-year gap for both of them. Even if I didn't include the Doom Patrol in this video, I would still include these two characters as well as certain other members of the Brotherhood of Evil, since the Brotherhood of Evil are also villains for the Teen Titans, which is also one of the main reasons why I did include the Doom Patrol. Then, in Superman and Lois Season 1 Episode 7, Natasha Irons, aka Steel, who has been a member not of the Teen Titans but of the Titans, and that is very recent, like in the last couple of years, made her live-action debut with a 27-year gap. Her backstory is altered drastically. Instead of being John Henry Irons' niece, she's the daughter of an alternate universe John Henry Irons, who was also the main Steel of Superman and Lois, and also she's the daughter of that universe's Lois Lane. Plus, her name is not Natasha, it's Natalie. Titans Season 3 Episode 1 saw the live-action debut of a Teen Titans villain known as Gizmo with a 40-year gap, as well as Tim Drake, also known as the Third Robin, also known as Red Robin, who basically for the first 15 years of the 21st century was the main Robin of the Teen Titans, right up until Damian Wayne took over. He has a 32-year gap, by the way. Episode 11 of Season 3 saw the live-action debut of Starfire's parents, Meander and Luander, both of whom appeared in the comics for the first time 38 years prior. And finally for 2021 is Madame Rouge, a member of the Brotherhood of Evil and enemy of the Doom Patrol and the Teen Titans, who debuted in Doom Patrol Season 3 Episode 1, 57 years after her debut in the comics. And finally, that brings us to 2022, which saw the live-action debut of just 2 characters, those being Jinx in Titan Season 4 Episode 3 with a 37-year gap, as well as Doom Patrol member Casey Brink with just a 6-year gap, debuting in Doom Patrol Season 4 Episode 4. So that brings us to the top 5 list. Let's start with the shortest, the characters who took the least amount of time between their comic debut and their live-action debut. At number 5 is the Doom Patrol member Casey Brink, who only took 6 years. In 4th place is a tie between Jaime Reyes and Emiko Queen at just 5 years. In 3rd place is Tanya Spears at 4 years. 2nd place is Dick Grayson at 3 years. And finally, in 1st place is Wallace West at just a single year. And as for the top 5 longest lists, in 5th place we actually have a 5-way tie between all of the main members of the Doom Patrol, the Chief, Negative Man, Elastigirl, and Robot Man, as well as technically kind of Wally West, all have a 55-year gap. Then in 4th place is a 3-way tie between the Brotherhood of Evil members, Brain, Mansoor Mallah, and Madame Rouge, all at 57 years. In 3rd place is Hawkfire at 58 years. In 2nd place is Aqualad at 59 years. And by far and away 1st place is Roy Harper at 72 years. And considering the next Teen Titans member to debut after Roy Harper wasn't until the 60s, 20 years later, I don't think Roy Harper's record will be beaten at all. So that is it for this video. If you haven't seen my other versions of this video on Superman, Batman, The Flash, and the Justice League, definitely check them out. And if you like this video, make sure to leave a like, share, and subscribe. Dibble. Bye.